What's up, world-class athlete? In this video, we're gonna be providing you with your customized development plan, where by the end of this video, you're gonna gain so much confidence, so much clarity and motivation, because you'll know of the 5 phases of the world-class forehand, which are these specific phases for you to focus on, and further, in each one of those phases, what are the key and anatomical improvements that you're gonna be making? So before we begin, I wanna highly encourage you, if you don't already have it, have footage of your stroke out and ready to follow along in real time as we go through each of these 5 areas. And most importantly of all, as you're going through and seeing your stroke, maintain that high level of ambition, because I remember when I first saw my footage, frankly, I was disgusted. It was awful. I had terrible technique. It was so tight. But because I kept the courageous state of mind, because I kept imagining with a high level of ambition, my forehand might look like this right now, but if I keep focusing and improving, it's gonna be world class. And ultimately, all of that allowed me to develop the key anatomical checkpoints that you're gonna be mastering that ultimately allow me to do that. And it feels extraordinary. Let's begin with the unit turn. The key checkpoint for the unit turn. The unit turn is gonna begin right after your split step ends. As you identify the oncoming ball coming to your forehand, you're going to initiate a smooth rotation of the core, finishing where you'll be able to see a few key checkpoints from that rear angle. Number 1, the left hand will be on the choke and you'll be able to see the racket through your eyes just like that. The second checkpoint to look for is with your right arm. The right elbow is going to be roughly in line with the shoulders, slightly on this side perhaps, but in that rough line. And the racket strings are going to be pointed towards the side fence just like that. 2 common mistakes that my students have made and that I've heard from so many of you, and I'm going to be showing their before and their after to really inspire you and show you world-class technique is possible for you. The 2 most common mistakes, number 1 is that players will take the racket back with just their arm. Now, the reason why you want to avoid making this mistake, again, just staying at a high level for this video, is because this is going to create tension in your right arm and not make it easier for you to rotate with your entire body just like that. The second common mistake that a lot of players will make here is as they initiate their unit turn, their right arm will be too straight. This is going to create added complexity and added unnecessary motion into that backswing position. So those are the key checkpoints to look for to know if you're doing it at a world-class level. Now, the second phase of the world-class forehand is going to be after that unit turn. There's going to be a fluid backswing, which is very simply just 2 anatomical motions from the right arm. The first is a slight amount of abduction with the elbow going back just like that, and the elbow extension. So abduction, extension, and with the left arm, you'll see that left arm is just going to straighten out, finishing with the backswing. Now, the finishing checkpoint for that backswing is the arm to the elbow will be directly in line with the shoulders, just like that. And the racket tip will be positioned up in a way at about a 45-degree angle with the strings pointed at an angle down. What this does is it allows you, when you accelerate, to keep that racket closed, generating that easy power from the shoulder. So those are the key checkpoints to look for. The 2 most common mistakes that so many players make with the backswing that you'll be mastering in this system are, number 1, out of the unit turn, the arm will travel too far back with the racket face being open, or the racket will go far back in the right spot, but the tip of the racket will be in what's known as a pre-flipped position. In other words, instead of the racket tip being up and away at about a 45-degree angle, it will be at about a 90 or perhaps even about a 100-degree angle, just like that, relative to that net. So from there, you now understand exactly how to do the unit turn, how to do the backswing. Let's jump into that 2-part acceleration, which is where you're going to get the most extraordinary benefit. So after executing the perfect unit turn and backswing, what's going to happen is a 2-fold process. First, the legs are going to drive, then the trunk is going to rotate, and the arm is going to accomplish 3 anatomical motions. Anatomical motion number 1 is the shoulder will flex. So that's the arm traveling upward. The second is you're gonna perform what's known as adduction. So the arm is gonna perform horizontal shoulder adduction, going up and forward. The third is that the shoulder is then gonna externally rotate to create that flip position. A fourth unconscious passive motion is the extension of the wrist. So after the leg drive torso rotation and the arm is pulled up and away, creating that flip, the racket will travel on an away path from the body. So essentially the acceleration travels an arc path where the arm travels away from the body and then travels towards the body. The midline of that arc is what Dr. Brian Gordon coined what's known as the transition point. That's where the racket is going to transition from a straight path. So notice how the racket is just pulling on a straight line to then a rotational path. That's where all your topspin is being generated. So those are the high-level key checkpoints that you want to look for with the acceleration. The two most common mistakes associated with the acceleration are, number one, instead of accelerating on an up and away path, the arm will travel down and in by flexing that bicep and that wrist. The other common mistake is that instead of the stroke being initiated from the leg drive, it will be initiated from that arm. Which, now you understand the common mistakes and the checkpoints for that, let's go ahead and close with the contact and the follow through. The perfect contact point that's gonna give you extraordinary pop and effortless power is gonna be achieved with, if you have either a bent or a straight arm, it's virtually identical. Where the elbow and shoulder joint right here is gonna be pointed in front of the body at approximately a 45-degree angle towards that net post. There is some slight variation here, but the key checkpoint that you want to look for is your arm positioned in front of the body with the shoulder to the elbow at about a 45-degree angle in front of the torso, just like that. The second checkpoint to look for is, with your contact point, the wrist is going to be in an extended position. Here would be flexed, here would be extended, which now we can dive into the two most common mistakes. Common mistake number one is that at contact, the elbow will exceed, this would be a 160-degree angle, this would be a 180-degree angle. You don't want to exceed 160 degrees. So common mistake number one is the arm is too bent. This is creating a biomechanical position of less power and less topspin, which is why you see even players with bent arm like Djokovic will maintain at least that 160 degree. The second most common mistake is that the arm will be too close to the trunk or will be in a more abducted position. This causes, again, a weakened contact and also the wrist to compensate by being in a more flexed position. So if you've ever felt like a lot of tension and weakness in your wrist, it's likely because of this specific contact point mistake. Which brings us to the last phase, the follow through. So you've executed now, or you know what to look for with the unit turn, you know what to look for at a high level from the backswing, the acceleration, part one, the acceleration, part two, the contact, now with the follow through. The optimal follow through, there is a lot of variation on the tour. You know, you have the Nadal buggy whip, you have the Federer extension, and you have the Djokovic spin. There's a lot of variation, but there are key checkpoints that we can learn from and what's gonna give you extraordinary benefit. The first is that with your follow through, you wanna ensure that, again, that upper joint segment from the shoulder to the elbow, that is extending through the ball at contact. A common mistake that a lot of players make is instead of that arm extending forward and out, the arm will stop accelerating and rather bend in across the body. This will cause you to feel like you're hitting the ball hard, but you're not getting any effortless pop. The second most common mistake with the follow through is that the wrist, rather than generating a topspin windshield wiper motion, will rather flex in at contact. Again, creating a lot of tension and weakness and lost consistency because you're not able to generate that devastating, confident forehand pop. All right, world-class athlete, we've covered a lot in this video. Again, we kept it high level just so you could know, okay, so of the 5 phases, which are the phases that I should focus on first? What are the key elements of my stroke do I need to improve? I hope you also got a lot of inspiration to see these players' journeys of how they started with making these mistakes and were able to transform to now hitting world-class technique. So again, as always, I'm challenging you. Have that courage, have that imagination to see yourself as a world-class athlete, because it's by consistently showing up with that high level of ambition and belief that you can do it, that not only do you gain an extraordinary level of enrichment and self-satisfaction and confidence, but your results are all the more extraordinary. So grateful again to be your coach. Let's get it.